Alright, last game for today. Hikaru has the block pieces. Gravity chess rating 2892, playing as white. Try to keep up if you want to push yourself to find the best moves, or just enjoy the commentary and analysis. So we have Hikaru playing g6. In this case, white realized it and was able to damage black's pawn structure around the king. But the bishop on g7, once it gets there, is going to be quite strong if it does get there. Hikaru is delaying the development of his bishop so that his bishop could protect the pawn on c5. Let's kind of think about what white should do here. Okay, white's castling, and now white needs to find a plan. Black has the two bishops, so ideally white should keep the position roughly closed. I don't think he can, though, with this pawn on c5. Then he opens up the position. This opens up the light squares. White still does have a light squared bishop. If pawn takes on c4, then the d4 pawn hangs. If pawn takes on c4, pawn d5, maybe. Then knight to b5. Knight to b4, sorry, is what I... Maybe not. Maybe... What else? This is a critical moment. Hikaru's taking some time to think. Knight to a5. Pawn takes c4. Knight takes. Queen a4 check doesn't work. Hikaru sacks the knight. His idea is if pawn takes knight, pawn b2. So you can't take the knight here. Maybe you could even. Actually could take. And queen trades. Rook takes. b2. b7. Rook b8. Knight. Yeah, I think it's just winning now for black if you go into that sequence. Because when the rook gets to b8, the pawn's not going anywhere anymore. So white having some really difficult moves here. Maybe just queen takes b3. Queen takes b3, or maybe pawn takes b3. Opens up the a file for the rook. I assume that queen takes b3 will be played here. Queen takes. Okay, pawn takes. Knight to b4. Rook takes a7. Bishop e4 can be played. Knight c3. And I think black is slightly better here, but the rook getting play on the a file should give white some playback. Okay, black does have the advantage here. He has the two bishops. White's structure is strong in the center, but black can play f5 at the right moment. So bishop d6 maybe, but then knight a3, knight c4. Knight's coming to c4, which is a very strong square for the knight. But then queen d8, pawn b5 can be played. Castles. So maybe h3. Okay, knight c4, queen d8. Queen c7. Covering the b7 pawn. Queen b8. Nice. Okay, rook to d8. Nope, black goes f5, just challenging the pawns in the center. h3, take, take, take. Take on e4, take on f3. Some decision has to be made here. I think take on... Okay, he takes on e4. I thought take on f3. b5, knight a5, queen d6. Maybe bishop d4. Nah, but then knight c6. Bishop b2. Completely overlooked this move. What a stunning move. White completely missed this as well. Let's take that. Up material. I like centralizing the queen here a little bit with queen d6. covering the pawn. Go rook d8 as well. Maybe he's thinking pawn c4, just rushing his pawn down the board. Okay, this pawn on c6 is quite troubling. It's not going anywhere for a long time. What's the plan here for black? How do you stop this pawn from going down? Pawn on c6 is so strong. Black's pawn's also not mobile. Maybe he's going to go after the b3 pawn. Okay, sacks his queen. Just, I think a blunder, and resigns the game here. Moves coming in so fast, by the way. It's very difficult to keep up. Okay, let's go to our analysis. And flip the board. Pawn b3, pawn g6. So white is understanding. Black is going for this setup with g6, bishop g7, and plays bishop to b2. Knight f6, takes. This does give black a slight edge out of the opening, but changes the pawn structure in a way where black's pawns may be weak later on in the game. And pawn d4. I thought maybe h4 immediately could be played, and it's okay to play, because if black doesn't play h5, and you just play like pawn d5, then after h5, you're getting some break on the king side, which is very annoying to these nice pawns on the king side for black. If you play g5, then this diagonal becomes weak, the f5 square becomes weak, and I think it's a nice idea that white could aim for. He plays d4, pawn d5, g3, and pawn c5. So black recognizes the lack of dark squared bishop, and with this diagonal opening up, the bishop will be a very strong piece. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop g2, bishop f5, positions roughly equal, and pawn to c4, which is a mistake. Engine suggests just pawn to e3, and I thought this is the way white could play. It's just keeping stability in the center, restricting this dark squared bishop, asking black what is he going to do. White went for something more challenging in the center, and this does make a lot of sense as well, because black's king is still stuck in the center, and just because you have the bishop doesn't mean you have an advantage if your king is being ripped open in the center. Hikaru takes on c4, pawn d5, and finds this very nice idea, pawn takes on b3. It is a bit risky because the king is in the center, but the idea was that if you take the knight, you trade the queens first and play pawn b2. And if pawn takes on b7, then rook to b8 wins material at least. Engine even says, let's just get a queen. And if you take this, get a queen, the bishop can take back, and huge advantage for black. Pawn takes, knight to b4, pawn e4, and he could have taken on e4, but doesn't want to risk some tactic on the e file. You could still play f5, but maybe knight to d2. Rook takes a7 first, but knight d2 as well, getting some play on the e file. So Hikaru doesn't take a pawn. He doesn't want to risk opening up his king. He has an advantage of being up a pawn at the moment, keeps it. Rook takes a7, getting the pawn back, and after queen b6, rook a4, bishop g7, knight d2. Positions roughly equal here. Queen c7 was played. I really thought queen d8 would be played, which is fine as well. But Hikaru chooses queen c7, which I think is quite interesting, just keeping an eye on the b7 pawn, and playing for b5. The queen on d8 also might get hit with knight a5, knight c6, which he avoids. It does run into d6 though with the tempo. So I was curious about why he made that move. Both apparently good, according to the engine. Queen to b8, rook to a3, pawn to f5. And I don't think anyone was really seeing that this move, bishop b2, was going to come, with the knight covering a6, pawn covering a4, and once the knight goes to a5, then the rook cannot go to a5. It happens so suddenly. h3, takes, b5, and you cannot go to a5 because of bishop to b2. You have to play knight to e3, and if bishop b2, then you have rook to a5. And if queen to b6, then queen to e2, take, and black is still slightly better, but in this case, a much better bishop b2. A tactic just came out of nowhere in the position, taking advantage of the rook not being able to use the a5 square, just closely looking at the consequences of each move. What an idea. Black is up material, queen c7, knight c6. Taking is actually not the best move here. Better is keeping the pawn on d5 rather than getting this pawn to the c6 square. Rook to e8 is the best move, and after you take, black can use the c file. Knight takes c6, takes, rook to e8, king to g2, rook to e8, rook c1, rook e5. Position's roughly equal here. The pawn is not going down the board anytime soon. But let's see what happened. Pawn b4, queen c4, rook e6. And actually white has an advantage here, this passed c pawn. But he's down on time. He goes rook c8 and blunders the queen with one move. Maybe he was hoping for rook takes, and the pawn is getting through. But in this case, after rook takes, pawn takes, black simply plays rook to b6, and with queen on e5, rook on b6, the b8 square is covered. Black is just up a full queen, so he resigns the game. So a one-move blunder to win the game. Let's take a look at our sheets. And analyze why Hikaru wins game number 3. Okay, so gravity chess versus Hikaru. Main reason for win, Hikaru found several tactical sequences to gain an advantage. And okay, position was roughly equal, but main reason he won is he took advantage of a late blunder and was also up on time. Could add to this. Main reason for loss, white blundered in a position he thought was actually winning for him. Notes, Hikaru continues to find tactical sequences which are quite clever and take direct advantage of the consequences of his opponent's moves. That bishop e2 move came out of nowhere, anticipating knight a5. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it shed some light on why Hikaru's a notch better than opponents around this range. Super consistent, not making errors, still getting into some worse positions sometimes, but finding very sharp tactical sequences to squirm out of them and get better positions. And his defensive skills, of course, incredible. Hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you again either tomorrow or another day. Bye for now.